In 1971, the 60s were over, but the counterculture movement was still in full swing. It took a visionary like Hunter S. Thompson to see that the wave had crested and was receding. His book Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas is both a paragon of the counterculture and an early post-mortem to it. Based on two separate journalistic trips to Sin City, Fear and Loathing combines those real events and spins them into a drug-hazed debauch in search of the American dream. There is no greater exemplar of Thompson's style of gonzo journalism, a subjective blend of truth and outrageous fiction with the journalist himself as protagonist. We missed the 60s, so we thought we would shake up some Singapore Slings and discuss Thompson's outrageous escapades in the bat country of the American West. Buy the ticket and take the ride with us. It's time for episode 66 of Toasting the Classics, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Welcome to Toasting the Classics. This is the podcast where we take something that people call a classic and we drink a drink related to the classic, then decide whether it's still a classic. My name's Dave McArthur.
And my name is Clint Lanier.
What did you choose for us this week? This is a book. I don't know how many people actually listen to these shows sequentially. I get the feeling people jump around quite a bit, but we're out of order for the first time in the 60 plus episodes we've been doing this, because I completely lost track of what the last thing was. We're going back to basics with a book here.
Right. So I chose the 1971 cult hit, actually just hit, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas by Hunter S. Thompson.
How did you read this? What was your methodology? Did you own the book?
I didn't own the book. I hadn't read it. I watched there's a pretty cool documentary on Netflix. I think it's on Netflix, maybe Amazon Prime, on Hunter S. Thompson. Right now, I think it might be called Gonzo. I'm not sure. It's the most recent one. It's narrated by Johnny Depp. I watched it. I'd always heard of, as a writer, I've always obviously heard about Thompson, and he's one of those closer to our generations that you really should read if you call yourself a writer. So, but I hadn't read anything by him. I think I'd read small pieces by him, but nothing substantial. And so it just kind of occurred to me, hey, let's read that. A little bit longer than I thought it was. I thought it'd be a really
No, it's not so bad. It's
quick read. Yeah, it was pretty quick.
So I read this years ago, and I had a copy of it. But like I've said many times, all of my stuff is in storage. So I felt kind of dumb buying the book again. So I got it on Amazon, whatever the instant thing we have on Kindle Unlimited, I call it. Yeah. So it was technically a graphic novel, but it had all the words.
Oh, how interesting.
So,
yeah.
I got a mental image, and I think that actually it's kind of appropriate because the original printing of this, or at least a lot of the material for it, I think had drawings along with it.
Yeah, it had that drawings.
The same guy, but
yeah, he was. God, let me find his name.
I know the name if I hear it because it's in his biography. He talks about him. Needman, maybe
Stedman, Ralph Stedman.
There we go.
Yeah, he was kind of a psychedelic artist of the age. He drew these just crazy pictures for it. So he did the illustrations. I think it was the very first piece that Thompson did for this magazine called Scanlan's Monthly, and it was about the Kentucky Derby. Paired
decadent and
something
else. Yeah.
The Kentucky Derby is decadent and depraved, and they sent him there to cover the race. It had nothing to do with the race. He was talking about all the people that went there and how crazy they were, druggies and drunks and depraved and depravity and stuff.
Did you come to our house when we did a Kentucky Derby party?
Yes, I did.
There, right? Yeah. That was a fun one, actually.
Yeah, it wasn't as depraved as perhaps it should have been. I think he could have been much more depraved.
Could have done some more depravity.
But if the kids hadn't been there, I think certainly the
kids are not there, it gets more depraved.
Yeah, so he was paired up with this Steedman guy, met him for the first time, and I think talked him into dropping acid the first time he met him. And Steedman had never.
Which way did that go? Did Hunter S. Thompson?
Yeah, Thompson got Steedman.
Okay.
Yeah, and Stedman, I guess it's Stedman. He had him drop acid the first time he met him. Stedman had never done it before, and he went just nuts. And then the whole weekend was filled with, like, that's how Thompson rolled, man. He was a hard drinking, hard living dude, man. His mixture of, like, the amount that he would take would kill a horse, every day. Yeah, and so he just watched the people. He didn't even worry about the race. He watched the people. But the point is that Fear and Loathing
that's what I would do. That's what I would do if I was there. It'd be like going to Mardi Gras or something. I mean, you don't really pay attention to parades. You look at the insanity that's going on all around the parade.
Absolutely. They just they paired up from that one article, and
Cool.
Fear and Loathing and everything that he did for Rolling Stone. Stedman would be his illustrator.
Basic synopsis, I think we should do here. We've got, this is the story of.
How about before the basic synopsis?
Okay, sure.
Let's get into the drink because I'm staring at it and I got to try it. I haven't even tried it yet.
I almost opened up my shaker like before I even got online.
Yeah, I know.
For some reason, I just feel like having a drink in the afternoon today. Maybe because I've been on a naval ship with a bunch of tiny little children. So
yeah, I don't blame you.
I could use.
So for this drink, as always, we pair the classic with a drink that has something to do with the classic. The opening scene of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas has him drinking Singapore Slings in Hollywood.
Well, the opening scene in the car.
Yeah, I guess it was a flashback where he's talking about how when he got the assignment. I guess I was going by chronology, not
chronologically. Yes, it starts out right. They're at a hotel drinking, but it's pretty famous. The opening to the book, the whole
the bat things.
We were, I don't know how far east of Barstow when the drugs started.
Kicking in, right?
Famous opening.
Gotta watch out for the goddamn bats.
Yeah, watch out for the goddamn bats. Yeah, I tried watching the Johnny Depp like after I'd read the book and done sort of my half-butted internet research, and I found Johnny Depp's portrayal of him so annoying. Maybe that goes. I remember the first time I saw Forrest Gump, I couldn't stand the way Tom Hanks was talking for the first 5 minutes, and then I got over it. So maybe that would have happened with Johnny Depp too.
So okay, so the drink it's a Singapore Sling. I made it the traditional way. It was actually created in Singapore, I believe, in the 1920s. It's made with the one that my recipe is 3/4 ounces gin, 1/2 ounce of Grand Marnier, 1/2 ounce of cherry liqueur, 1/2 ounce of Benedictine herbal liqueur. Think of any herbal liqueur. I actually changed it for something called Nocino, which is another herbal liqueur that I had. I didn't want to go out and spend $50 on a bottle that I would use 1/2 ounce from. But you just need some type of herbal taste in there. And then let's see, it's got 1 ounce of pineapple juice, 1/2 ounce of lime juice. I'm looking over on my counter, and that's it. You throw and a dash of bitters. Throw all that in a cocktail shaker, shake it with ice, strain it over ice in a highball glass, and there you have the Singapore Sling. So mine's probably a lot darker than yours because
yours is much darker than mine. What's giving all that color? Is that the Grand Marnier?
Yeah, no, it's actually it's the Nocino. So that's like almost black. And then the bitters are pretty dark as well, but it tastes amazing. It's going to taste a lot like the cheap classic. If you were to order this in a bar in Hollywood in the 1970s, they probably just would have been gin and sweet and sour like that. That's the Singapore Sling to like the cheap way to do it. And this has sweet and sour in it, but it also has a lot of the herbs. So it's got spices in it and stuff like that. It's pretty good.
I was completely baffled this morning because I made these last night just to sort of practice, and my wife was like, "Oh, let's try those." We're watching Yellowstone. She's like, "Let's try these drinks." So this morning she was like, "What show are you guys doing that you needed the Tokyo Drift for?" And I was like,
Tokyo Drift.
What? I had no idea for a second. I was like completely nonplussed, and I realized. So we tried it last night. I was completely daunted by the ingredients you're talking about. I have a very limited stock of cocktail making supplies here. I found you found me a pared down version, which is just equal parts gin and pineapple juice, and then not quite half of what, a little bit less than half of what you put in for those in lime juice. So that's what I'm drinking. It pretty much tastes like pineapple juice with gin in it. I don't really I don't highly recommend this. What you're drinking sounds much tastier. We're going out tonight, and I promise I will drink a Singapore Sling, a proper one.
A proper one. Okay, great. So I have a friend who is a bartender over on Long Island, and it's at a really like reputable, well-known kind of cocktail program establishment. I'll find out his name and give you his name and the place and go see him. He's the guy's a cocktail writer and I mean really knows his stuff. So
cool. I would do that.
He can make you some really good stuff. But so thank you for that, for letting me charge ahead of the drink.
I'm happy to start sipping. It's nice.
So go for it. Go. So
it's good to be indoors with a drink. It's a good time.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
I hate to tell you, but it's about 63 degrees out here and sunny, and
it's actually about 63 degrees here. It's been very warm so far this year, but it's rainy. We were out on a ship on the Hudson River, and it was raining.
That's cold though, isn't it?
little unpleasant. So
yeah,
it's wet. It's not cold. It's not cold at all. It hasn't hardly been cold at all yet. I'm still dreading it. I had a nightmare about getting through the winter the other day. I think I've built it up in my head as a big deal. Even though I originally am from the East Coast, I'm just like worried about it.
Yeah, you lost a bit of your edge. All right, so go ahead and give us a synopsis of Fear and Loathing.
So the synopsis is, and everything that takes place in this book is through this drug and alcohol induced haze and confusion. What's the phrase? Stream of consciousness, and it's a description of his trip to cover a motorcycle race in the desert outside of Las Vegas, and he does that. He goes and he sees a little bit of it, and they write about it. Mostly, he's just intoxicated off his mind the whole time. And then the second, he gets called to another one, which is a conference, like an anti-drug conference for police officers from all over the country. And he's there ostensibly as a journalist, but again, it's hard to say whether this is all true, of course, because these events did happen. We can get into later the whole concept of gonzo journalism and stuff like that. But essentially, the synopsis is a journalist is sent to cover 2 different conferences in Las Vegas and gets through them well, and then just a mind-numbing drug bender. Stream of consciousness description of all that, and it is a commentary on the end of the counterculture movement of the 1960s. This is like, I think it's after Watergate has happened, right? Or it's right about that same time?
No, I think it's 70, so it happened, 70.
1970.
I think, okay, published in 71, yeah.
Right. He had his attorney with him in the book, who is a stand-in for an actual person that we can talk about later. But in the book, he has a Samoan attorney who's just as crazy as he is, if not crazier, in terms of the drugs and the violence and everything. And the 2 of them somehow managed to get through this weekend without killing each other or anyone else. Right. They don't get arrested. It's kind of a miracle how they survive it. But that's the story. I don't know. Maybe I've missed out on some of the plot. You could fill in some details.
I mean, that really is the gist of it. There are a lot of, I think, minor characters, including his cars. His cars play a big part. In the first time, it's the red shark. So it's like this big red convertible.
The red one and a white one. They got 2 convertibles.
I think it's a white whale and the red shark.
White whale. There we go.
Yeah.
That's great.
So he starts off with that. He ends up getting another convertible Cadillac. It's a big white Cadillac, calls out with a white whale, and they tear the crap out of those. I liken it to like a drunk frat spring break, fraternity guys spring break from like circa 1993 or something.
Right.
Just absolute bedlam and debauchery and tons of drugs and tons of drinking and no respect for anything. It's kind of like the courage that you get when on drugs or drinking, just absolutely coursing through their veins.
The courage to do a lot of crazy stuff and say a lot of crazy stuff, but then also these huge amounts of paranoia. He spends a lot of time terrified, that he's going to get arrested for all the things that he's done, which is pretty reasonable considering how crazy these guys are behaving. Right.
Yeah. So he spends a lot of time kind of imagining scenarios that never happen. Like, when the cop does this, I'm going to tell him this, and then he it's almost like that J.D. Salinger. Holden. So when Holden's in the hotel and he's imagining the pimp like beat him up or shot him or something like that, and he's like going through the story in his mind and everything that would happen and everything he would say. Yeah. Thompson sort of does that. He does like, the cop's going to come up to me and I'm going to tell him this, and then he's going to say this.
Do you ever do that? You ever do that inside your head? There was an Onion article one time that said imaginary argument getting pretty intense. I was thinking, like, I've done that. Like, I've thought, like, if somebody says this, I'm going to say that. And then I'm going to say this. And I'm like, a minute into it, I'm like, what am I doing? Like, it's not a real argument,
It gets so bad that you want the argument to happen.
Exactly. Just so you prepared all your comments.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So as a lawyer, you must appreciate that. Yeah, this does put a certain spin on law. I think you and I need to go to Vegas just so I can say I'm with my attorney the entire time.
Yeah,
I think that would be great.
Go get you a PI card.
Yeah. I want to be a doctor of divinity myself, but.
So if we were really a guerrilla podcast, obviously we wouldn't just be drinking Singapore Slings. We'd be like huffing ether, one of the many terrible things that go on. What drugs get mentioned in this book?
Okay.
I mean, there's tons of them.
I have the list. You ready?
Okay. Okay.
All right. So at the very beginning, he says that they became sidetracked by a search for the American dream, with 2 bags of grass, 75 pellets of mescaline, 5 sheets of high-powered blotter acid, a salt shaker half full of cocaine, and a whole galaxy of multicolored uppers, downers, screamers, laughers, and also a quart of tequila, a quart of rum, a case of Budweiser, a pint of raw ether, and,
Yeah.
and 2 dozen amyls. I was like, oh my God.
And he does say that they're not really intending on using all of that on this trip, but then they end up, I think, using almost
They
all
use
of it.
they use all of it. Yeah.
So,
Well, yeah. I think it was just,
if you have mescaline, I've never done mescaline, but I'm just saying, if you have mescaline, I feel like that's what you're doing. No, you're doing that. Isn't that what you're doing this weekend? That's not like you don't like combine that with a whole bunch of other things. Like,
well, and they did that. Like often they would take a sheet of acid.
Yeah.
And then take mescaline.
Blotter acid just means LSD, right? That's not
right. I think so. Yeah. And then they're obviously drinking the whole time and just drinking straight stuff. There's also, it doesn't mention it, but he drank mescal throughout it, which is crazy because
I think they mentioned
we never hear of people drinking mescal back in that. Oh, you know what? Shit.
They're in the Southwest. They're hip to the jive, right? They know about mezcal back in those days.
I was supposed to top off my drink with club soda. I forgot that.
Oh, were you really? Maybe I was. That actually, I feel like that would make this better. Although I don't actually have club soda, but I would have gotten it if I'd known I was supposed to do that. That would be nice. I came down and the kids had gotten into the pineapple juice. I left it on the table and Cleo had opened up the juice, which I was like, no, that's for Debbie.
Kids are like to pineapple juice like ants are to sugar. I mean, they just find it. And
there was a trail of kids leading into my kitchen.
Pretty much.
Yeah, but basically anything sweet that I leave around the house, the kids are going to get into.
You know, the club soda actually cuts down the sweetness just a little bit, just enough. It's pretty good.
I think that would be really good, actually. Yeah. I really would like to add that. I'm actually going to order a Singapore Sling. We're going. Karina's getting home early. We're going to go to the Met. They have late hours on Friday, so we're going to go and see the new exhibit on the Tudors for the English.
Oh, cool.
And then we're going to go get a drink, go get a cocktail somewhere or something. So I get a Singapore. Cool. Assuming you can order that in bars, which I think you can.
I think if you go to a cocktail place, not like just some street bar or something.
Those are my favorite, though, the street bars. I like those.
Yeah. So he was known for gonzo journalism. That was his shtick, right?
Yep. I watched an interview with him today. I would guess this was from the late 70s, maybe even around 1980 or so. He was being interviewed about what gonzo journalism is. And he said, essentially, there was a period in his career where he was working so fast and having to send things in so fast that he ended up just taking his notes from whatever he was attending and sending the notes directly to the printer. I don't know how you do it in those days in the late 60s, maybe some kind of teletype or telegram.
Yeah, there's it was almost like an early fax machine that he was.
That's what I was picturing. Exactly.
Yeah, he was given. And this thing was like the size of a washing machine. It was huge.
You never think about like communications and stuff like that. This is getting a little bit off the track, but we went to Central High School in Arkansas, where the kids were being blocked from the integration of the school was being blocked, and they had to send in the troops to integrate the school. Anyway, we were watching this thing. We were talking about the national reporting on the event, and I was like, "This was in the 50s. How could there be national reporting on the event?" And I actually had to look it up. They did have like a cable that could send television around the country pretty early, like in the 50s. There was quite a bit of telecommunications infrastructure that we don't think about now because we're just like, well, how do you do anything without the internet?
Right.
That is everything. So,
famously what was a stock? There's a stock thing, the ticker tape. What was the name for it? And you would have to subscribe to it. But you'd have this ticker tape thing. It would give out stock.
Is that what teletype is?
I don't. Maybe. I thought there was a certain name for it.
I mean, it's like already this stuff was around when we were kids, and it's already like lost to history almost. How the heck did people get information around the country before the internet? It's so ubiquitous that. But anyway, so he was just sending his notes instantly and having them printed as they were, which turned into people would be like, "Well, this is your style." It was almost like a stream of consciousness journalism. And some guy referred to it as gonzo, and he repeated that. And it almost seemed like he was sitting there in this interview and he was saying, I get annoyed with having to justify the term gonzo because I didn't really make it up. It just stuck. It sounded good. And this is the style that I have, is that essentially what it has come to mean. I think this interviewer was almost proving what I think, which is that people were sort of creating a definition of what gonzo journalism is. The interviewer was telling me, he's like, well, it's sort of, you go there and you're part of the events that are happening. You're there and you write subjectively because you're a part of it. And that's gonzo journalism. And Hunter S. Thompson was kind of like, yeah, I guess so. I guess that's what it is. It's different than what Tom Wolfe does, is what he seems to have a rivalry with Tom Wolfe. So we should do a Tom Wolfe book. I read Right Stuff. He's really good. But
so it was actually that Kentucky Derby article. That's the one.
And also his big Hell's Angels book, I think, was his number one thing. The thing that he really got famous for doing was the Hell's Angels book.
Yeah, Hell's Angel, that's where he established that he's like an immersive journalist. Like he participates in whatever it is, right?
Right.
He doesn't just sit back and observe or talk about what happens based on other accounts. Like, he becomes part of it.
He got beat up by the Hell's Angels really bad because he got in an argument. I watched an interview with that. There was another one where he's confronting with a guy from the Hell's Angels, and the guy was saying, well, you were stupid. The reason you got beat up is because you told this guy to stop beating up his wife.
Right.
I was like, what? You don't admit that you're on the side of the guy that was like, it sounded to me like Hunter S. Thompson was on the right end of that one. But
don't you mean his old lady?
His old lady, yes, exactly.
Yeah,
he was beating up his old lady, and the worst part was that he also kicked his dog.
Yeah, he kicked his dog. Well, the dog bit him. The dog bit him because he was beating up the old lady, and then Hunter S. Thompson jumped in because he's beating up this woman, and then the whole gang stomped him.
And the whole gang stomped him is what they exactly.
Yeah.
That actually sounded. I actually thought I might be interested in reading that book, the Hell's Angels one. Do you think I captured gonzo journalism?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, according to an article about it, he was writing that Kentucky Derby article. He said that he was up against the deadline and just started tearing pages out of his notebook and sending it directly. And so they would publish these crazy accounts of things that happened and so forth. And so that was part of it. It was kind of this first person stream of consciousness, but it's based on notes. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas is based on tapes. So they pushed the tape player to record as soon as they got in the car, and they taped everything that happened. Supposedly he taped everything that happened because he was going to be drugged up and drunk. He couldn't remember, right? So he sent those to the editor as well.
Great idea. I should start doing that when I'm out sometime, just record notes about what's happening.
Anyway, he's just, he was irreverent.
Yeah, you could say that.
He was paranoid. I think that was part of his nature, was paranoia. And I think he was a bit kind of full of himself, a little bit, calling himself Dr. Thompson and stuff like that. He was just a little bit, he had an ego.
His name is Raoul Duke in the book, right?
Yes.
He's a character in the book, but Raoul Duke's also a name he uses for things.
He used that as a pseudonym. Certain things were written by Raoul Duke. It wasn't, he'd say, well, I didn't write it. Raoul Duke wrote it, but it was, everybody was in on the joke, what's interesting is that Doonesbury. Okay. Yeah. Do you remember the Duke character?
Yes.
Uncle Duke?
Oh, and he's got the glasses and he looks
that's
just
who it
like
is.
Hunter S. Thompson. Yeah. I think I did know that at some point in my life, but yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
He basically completely
the hat. He's got the glasses. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah. Safari hat, glasses. He's got the cigarette holder. Gary Trudeau.
Gary Trudeau. I thought he was like the Prime Minister of Canada at one point. No, that's Justin Trudeau.
Justin Trudeau. No.
That's why I can't remember it. Justin Trudeau replaced Gary Trudeau in my head. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I used to read Doonesbury when I was a kid. I always had the impression that I was coming in late on Doonesbury.
I know. Well, I never understood it.
It was a lot funnier, 20 years before me.
I never understood it because it was, I would read it as I was a little kid. So I get the paper and here's a comic strip. And then I'd read it and I'd be like, that's not that funny. Yeah. I don't get it. Right.
Doonesbury was one you had to follow. Like, I think if you read it all the time, it would have been.
Well, it's also political commentary. And I didn't.
Political commentary, yeah.
I never found Family Circus funny either.
You know what? Family Circus has a bad rap, but I think Family Circus had some funny panels.
It appeals to parents, not children. Yep. It appeals to your mom will laugh when she reads it, but you'll read it and be like, what? This is, I don't get it. This is dumb. What is his appeal, you think?
I might not be the person to ask about this because, frankly, I don't love his stuff. I'm interested in reading the Hells Angels thing because I feel like I might learn a little bit more from that. Mm-hmm. But this one just seems like somebody getting intoxicated for 200 pages and then just writing it down. I don't know that I guess this would have hit you in 1970, 1971 if you were a young person in the counterculture or even adjacent to the counterculture or aware of the counterculture, anything edgy would have been really, really, you would have eaten it up in 1971. You know, I mean, this is pre-Watergate. This is before everything really changed. I think we talk about the 60s, but I think Watergate's the moment when things really changed, and the end of Vietnam. I think this would have hit you like a big deal, but to me, it's just kind of, what's he talking about? You know, I mean, it's just a bunch of drugs, and it's a bunch of, I don't love his stuff. I read this years and years ago. I had a book called Hey Rube, because I think he did a column called Hey Rube for Sports Illustrated for years. And I had a book that was a collection of his stories from that. And by that point in his life, he was just like a jaded, angry, you know, he was, you could already tell he was suicidal. He was an alcoholic, a big gambler. He was always talking about gambling in those articles and stuff. It was just, grew to not really like the guy in some ways, even though I think if I'd been a contemporary, I probably would have thought he was really cool. I kind of put myself in my dad's shoes, and I'm like, I probably would have been into this guy. But 30 years later, it seems, you know, on the other side of Reagan, this seems kind of lame. You know, it just kind of seems like, and it's kind of what he's commenting on, right? A lot in this book is he's talking about the end of the counterculture and the moment when the wave of the hippies broke. I think he refers to that, where he's saying you could stand on a mountain east or west of Las Vegas and look down and see the moment when the wave broke and then receded, like, of the counterculture. And it's kind of, you know, to me, like I said, as someone who grew up on the other side of Reagan, I look at it and I'm like, yeah, it's a bunch of people trying to do drugs and drink and have sex and enjoy that. And that's wonderful, but it's really not particularly deep. That doesn't really say much. That you're just gratifying yourself, basically. It's not really, I don't find that to be a deep intellectual movement. And actually, I think Hunter S. Thompson said some of those things himself. He talked about the hippie movement as being not as artistic as the Beat Generation, right? Like they were doing some of this stuff, but it was a part of, like, Kerouac was an artist, and Burroughs is an artist, and Ginsberg, and all those guys are legitimate artists also. And then also not as intellectual as some of the left-leaning people that were around in the 60s. The new left he refers to. I don't actually know what that refers to. I don't know who that is. So I'm stupid. But you're in academia. I'm sure you know all about the new left, right? I'm sure they're big heroes of yours.
Well, I think the new left was the 1968 Democratic Convention, Abby Hoffman and the Chicago 8 and those guys, because they're Democrats, but they're the new left. They're not.
But those were smart intellectual guys that were. I don't know if you necessarily agree with them, but they had a mission and something they were trying to do.
Right. Well, I think that's who the audience is. Like Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, I think that's who the audience is. So I mean, so he wrote this ultimately for Rolling Stone as, like, I think a 2-part.
I think
that would have been a really long article, but like 2 parts. And I think
he may have published 2 separate articles for Rolling Stone about these 2 different conferences, and then combined them into a fictional work later. I think that's the publication history there.
But I mean, the audience would have been more of a highbrow intellectual audience. I mean, it was people like Rolling Stone. Quickly, it went from music to culture. You know, he's not writing to hippies. He's writing to people like probably Abby Hoffman and all these, you know, these left-leaning leftists. Well, Abby Hoffman was pretty leftist, but these very left-leaning kind of intellectuals, right? Young intellectuals, because there was a movement, and I think the counterculture movement was part of that. It wasn't just hippies; it was all of that. I think
counterculture is a broader umbrella term for all these different things,
right? And I think he sort of sees it like 1968, Nixon is elected. And I think that was probably the end of it. And I think he mentions as much, like the end was Nixon. They had Democrats in the White House and there was a chance, and they looked on the Republicans as a real sort of like owned by corporations. And, you know, I mean, pretty much everything they say about them now still they're saying about them back then.
They looked on them as being just the past, as not representing any current movement. And it's very similar to what happened like when Trump was elected. I think it's sort of the same thing. I think people were like, well, wait a minute, this is still around. Like, this is not something that the whole country's moving past. This is people who are different than me, who have a different take on things, still exist. They're not necessarily older than me and about to die. Like it's like a vibrant movement of its own. Something that still needs to be dealt with. So I mean, I think honestly, my take on this has always been that the stakes were much higher in the 60s. than what we're dealing with today. People are so bent out of shape of what's going on today. But I think the situation in the country and the world the stakes were much higher back then.
Maybe so, but I mean, I think I get what he's doing here. He's ultimately becomes about trying to find the American dream, right? And so go to Las Vegas and try to find the American dream. And so what he finds is these cops at the cop convention,
right?
And they all turn out to be a bunch of idiots. Everybody else is pretty buttoned down and stodgy, and it's like a Republican convention, right? But at the same time, they're kind of worshiping at the altar of the ultimate Babylon of Las Vegas, right?
What strikes me about what goes on at that convention, the police convention, though, is okay. So the attitudes are obviously conservative. They're cops, I mean, they're going to be a more conservative type of person. But the misinformation is what shocks me. Like today, if you went to a conference of cops in Las Vegas about drugs, they would be conservative guys. There'd be blue collar conservative guys, but they would not know how drugs work. They wouldn't just be completely in the dark about how they're like the things that they're fighting. There's just so much more information today. Like it was just ridiculous. I can't remember, the way they were talking about dope fiends, but what they mean is like people that smoke marijuana.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
All they think about is, I'm like, okay,
And if you don't do drugs, you're square. There's like this scale. You're with it. You jive.
Yeah, you're hip or you're cool.
You're square, right?
But like somebody put together like the contemporary equivalent of a PowerPoint, where like it was one,
pretty much,
two, square.
If you watch any of those old drug films, like Reefer Madness and stuff like that, that's how they thought of it. I mean, they never partook of it themselves. Oh heavens, Betsy! They had all these kind of presuppositions about how people acted and the type of people who do it. I think that's something that he enjoyed. The people who did it were long-haired hippies or ne'er-do-wells, right? Throughout the book, he refers to himself as a respected journalist. He's a respected journalist. He's a doctor of journalism before he's a doctor of divinity. He would never do it, but yet he's beaked out of his mind. Did you hear the story about the entire time?
Did you hear the story about he ran for sheriff of Aspen? Back in the 70s, I think. His opponent was like the super conservative guy, one of these guys with a crew cut, from the 50s, the people that were holdover from the 50s. So he shaved his head completely and kept referring to his opponent as my long-haired opponent.
My long-haired opponent. He had some pretty good ideas. He was actually kind of ahead of his time. He wanted to change the name of Aspen, Colorado to Fat City.
Right.
So it wouldn't sound as appealing for tourists and people moving there. He wanted to tear up all the roads and devote them to grassed walkways. He had his whole list. Basically, it was, quit ruining my town. He wanted the tourists and the corporations to stop coming there. You can't put 100% faith in that any of this happened. No. At all.
And I don't know whether it's because he's intoxicated or whether it's because he's a liar. It's hard to tell.
Well, and I think it's also because that's the style of Gonzo is he could use hyperbole, he could exaggerate, he could obviously he's changing names, he's doing things like that, might change locations, order of events, magnitude of events. I found it really interesting. I found it kind of compelling, and I guess. Why is because it was so different. And that's sort of what people latch onto. If you look at anybody you've ever heard of, you've only heard of them because they did something different than anybody else.
Okay.
Because if they did the same thing as anybody else, you'd never heard of them. And so he broke out by accident, by sending in his notebook because he was up against it. But he was also a fantastic drug user. Not fantastic in the sense of, oh, that's wonderful, but fantastic as in, oh my God, I can't believe you snorted that much coke.
I can't believe some of these people survive. Like,
let's see.
If I have too many drinks, like the next day, I feel like I have the flu. I can't do anything. I don't know how these people live these lives. Like maybe they just respond differently to things. I don't know how somebody survives being like, he died in like 2000, maybe 2001, something like that. And he shot himself.
Shot himself.
He didn't die directly of anything to do with drugs or the alcohol or anything.
Well, let me read you. By the time he killed himself, though, he was just absolutely a shell of himself. So this is his routine. According to a reporter that was allowed to follow him during the day, and this is in, I think, 1990. Okay, so it's a book written in '94 by journalist Gene Carroll. It's called Hunter: The Strange and Savage Life of Hunter S. Thompson. So this is the routine according to this essentially biography. He wakes up at 3 p.m. At 3:05, he has a Chivas Regal, so he has a scotch with his morning papers and a Dunhill cigarette. 3:45 p.m., he snorts cocaine. 3:50, he has another glass of Chivas and another cigarette. At 4:05, first cup of coffee and another cigarette. 4:15, cocaine. 4:16, orange juice and a cigarette. 4:30, cocaine. 4:54, cocaine. I'm not done. 5:05, cocaine. 5:11 is coffee and a Dunhill cigarette.
Wow.
5:30, he adds more ice, has another scotch. 5:45 has Coke. 6 p.m., he has a joint. At 7:05, he goes down to Woody Creek Tavern for lunch. 7:05 p.m., goes down to the tavern for lunch. His lunch is a Heineken, 2 margaritas, 2 cheeseburgers, 2 orders of fries,
cocaine,
a plate of tomatoes, coleslaw, and a taco salad, a double order of onion rings, carrot cake, ice cream, bean fritter, a cigarette, another Heineken, cocaine, and for the ride home, a snow cone, which is a glass of shredded ice over which is poured 3 or 4 jiggers of scotch.
No, I don't know how you survive. I don't know.
I'm not done.
Not
done. 9 p.m. cocaine, 10 p.m. drops acid, 11 p.m. chartreuse, which is totally terrible liquor.
I think I've had chartreuse. Yeah, that's
cocaine and pot. 11:30 Coke. Midnight. At midnight, Hunter's ready to start writing. 12:05 to 6 a.m. He drinks chartreuse. Has cocaine, pot, Chivas, coffee, Heineken, clove cigarettes, grapefruit, Dunhills, orange juice, and gin. At 6 a.m., he goes to the hot tub, has a champagne, a Dove bar, and fettuccine Alfredo. At 8:20, he sleeps. Wow. 8:20 in the morning, the next morning. That's his daily routine.
Yeah. I'm surprised he's up as early as he is, like according
He made it to 67 and killed himself, I think, in 2005. So
yeah, that's
hard. At 67, and you see the pictures of him at like 67 towards the end, he looked terrible. I mean, he looked just shriveled up. And
I'm gonna look that up while we're talking. But
look at him in 1970 when he does like Fear and Loathing, and then look at him.
No, I've seen that. I've seen the pictures of him young.
One of the bars I visited for my book, Bucket List Bars, which is available now on Amazon. We went to New Orleans and we visited this bar called the French 75 Bar. It's this old historic hotel.
Do you remember where that was?
Yeah, it's not on Bourbon. It's off of Bourbon though. It's in the French section, of course, French Quarter. 75 Bar, New Orleans.
I don't know. He looks old. He doesn't. Just looks old.
So it's in Arnaud's restaurant on Bienville.
Oh, you're in the quarter. Okay.
Yeah, in the quarter. And I was talking to the bartender there, Chris Hanna. And Chris Hanna is a fantastic bartender. Anyway, we're at this bar. Chris Hanna's there. Fantastic bartender. And it's a great bar. I mean, and it's a really kind of expensive, cocktail lounge, cocktail type of bar. And I asked him, so actually, I guess my co-author for my book, Bucket List Bars, which is available on Amazon, asked him.
Can we please start being just like a bit we do?
Right. So he asked him, what celebrities have been in here, who have been your favorites or something. And he says, my favorite was when Hunter S. Thompson came in with Johnny Depp. Really? Johnny Depp, and I can't remember somebody else, another famous celebrity, came in with Hunter S. Thompson. They're driving a convertible. They parked it out in the street. They had to carry him in. This is when he was in a wheelchair, because he was pretty much limited to a wheelchair at the end, because he was he completely destroyed his body.
Well, yeah.
So they brought him in. They sat him up at the bar, and the manager thought that he was drunk, but he's like, no, we can't serve that guy. Get him out of the bar. And Chris is like, hey, I'll take care of this. It's on me. Because Chris recognized who it was and was like, it's on me. And so he just started drinking everything under the sun. And we said, well, what do you, do anything surprise you about it? It's like, that guy uses the F word more than anybody I've ever seen.
Wow.
He uses it routinely because the F is, hey, pass me that effing drink, or can you give me an effing ashtray? Hey, MFer, come over here real quick. But he doesn't do it like,
Yeah.
I don't know, not in a, I don't know, mean or threatening way. He just uses it.
I think some people, when they get super intoxicated, they sort of start. I had a friend who was a little bit of a closet alcoholic, and it took all of us a little while to catch on to it because
you're not talking about me, are you?
No, we have an intervention stage for you.
Okay.
It's coming up next week.
Good.
No, this is somebody else, but we all realized if he started dropping the F bomb every other word, that it was time. It was time to figure out where he had hit in the bottle and what So
yeah.
It was
those
normally he's a very soft spoken guy, perfectly, but like all of a sudden he'd be like, F this and you're an F-er. Like, okay, man, all right.
There are those tells, aren't there?
There really are those tells, exactly.
So he another thing, he sort of idolized Hemingway. And I wondered if there was any.
Like it's probably why he shot himself.
Yeah, I was going to say, Hemingway he lived hard too. I don't think Hemingway used drugs. He might have. They weren't really associated in Hemingway's day as they are now. Like you could take prescription uppers and downers and everything else. I think methamphetamines were prescribed.
A lot of this stuff didn't really become like illegal until much later than you think. I mean, there are all these stories about all the guys playing baseball in the 70s that were just on greenies all the time. Like, constantly.
Right, exactly.
And it wasn't even, I don't even know if it was illegal or what, or nobody knew it was bad for you, or anyway. Sorry, I cut you off.
So no, that's fine. I was just going to say that he led kind of a parallel life. Like Hemingway was a hard drinker. We talked about that. Yeah. He was a hard drinker, and he shot himself in Idaho. Yep. Blew his head off at his cabin. So here he is in Aspen.
And like we said before, what else do you do in Idaho? Colorado. Not that far away, right? Sort of the same.
Yeah, it's right next door.
Yeah, pretty much. So,
Well, yeah. I mean, there's Aspen. He owned a little ranch outside of Aspen.
The thing that I admire about both Hemingway way more so, maybe 50 times to the extent of Hunter S. Thompson, is that they're out there and they're writing and they're intellectuals. They're smart guys, but they're out there living and like experiencing life. They're not sitting back somewhere and writing about the world in the abstract. These are people that, to their detriment, are out there living lives. And I don't know if there's anybody like that anymore. I don't know if there's anybody today that combines intellectually and high quality art with like really living. And also, I hate to say this today in 2022, but they're very much men. They're very much like, they like cars and trucks and guns and hunting and like all this dude stuff that, like, if you're a writer today in 2022, that's not an option. There's no writers today that are that masculine or that traditionally masculine.
I'm pretty I am pretty masculine. I'm just letting you know.
Right. Well, all right.
I know I drive a minivan, but it's a masculine minivan.
You think you think Hunter S. Thompson would have been caught dead driving a minivan? You think
when you realize how convenient it is when picking up the kids?
Hey, I'm just saying. Do you think Ernest Hemingway would have taken his Cub Scout troop, his kids' Cub Scout troop, and like taken them on a tour of a battleship? No, there's no.
Well, if he did, he would have.
He would have been.
He would have used a minivan. I'm telling you that.
It would have helped. No, yes, but it's.
You're going to hate this. I don't know if you'd claim intellectual, but I think there are a few. I think like Joe Rogan nowadays. I don't even know if he's an artist. Well, I mean, he's a comedian, and I guess that's an art form. Intellectual,
okay, but he's not an intellectual. I mean, it's not. That's not
right.
He's not a writer.
I know. I see what you're saying, but see, at the same time, though, we don't.
Joe Rogan is almost like, it's exactly what I'm talking about. Like he's very dude, right? Very traditional dude, but he's like a meathead. Like he's not.
No, he hunts and he does.
Right. That's what I mean. No, there are still people like that, but I'm saying if you combine, you talk to Hunter S. Thompson, the guy is a college educated, smart guy.
Yeah.
But he's just like this maniac too. And I'm very intoxicated by that combination. It's the way that I would like I would envision myself. It's not what I actually am. In reality, I'm like a dad. I'm very chill, but I would like to be an intellectual maniac. Like that's interesting to me. That's compelling to me. But
I think another
too
big
much on the soft side.
I think another big difference is though that we don't have rock star writers anymore. We really don't.
But the reason we don't,
because you mentioned,
I think the rock star died with Kurt Cobain. I think that's when people stopped. There were no more like badass rock stars after that.
Yeah. I don't know about Kurt Cobain.
The guy shot himself. Also,
yeah.
Is this our suite? Are we doing a suite of like people who shot themselves?
By the way, we are.
Long-term listeners of Toasting the Classics, we're going to put together a bundle of all the episodes we've done about guys that shot themselves.
That'll be our Christmas.
There's about 15 of them.
That'll be our Christmas special.
One
after. Listen to it when you're by yourself and you have no family.
Pour yourself some eggnog and grease up the shotgun. And
get yourself a couple of big cans of Bud Ice, and have a good time. I think
you know what it costs to get a Bud Light in the bar next door to my house?
How much?
It's $5. I was looking at the list of beers, and I was like,
Bud Light.
For a Bud Light, and I was like, oh, there's a cheap beer over there, and I was like, oh, it's like a Bud Light. I mean, that's $5.
I know, for a Bud Light. So you mentioned Kerouac, you mentioned Burroughs. I mean, these guys were insane intellectuals. You're right. Before them, you had Hemingway, you had Fitzgerald, you had, again, insane.
Apparently Fitzgerald was Thompson's favorite. He loved the Great Gatsby. There's according to him, there's a connection between Fear and Loathing and The Great Gatsby. And I had a little trouble. I was like, I think Fitzgerald could write Hunter S. Thompson under the table any day of the week.
I don't think it's writing. I was just where I went.
But I think what was similar about them is that the Great Gatsby is a post-mortem on a decadent epoch. Right. It's like, this was the 20s. The 20s were crazy. And that's how Fitzgerald really lived. They had all these bacchanals at his house and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I think Thompson is doing a post-mortem on the 60s in the same sort of way.
Maybe. I think the Gatsby was also kind of a statement on the American dream, so to speak, because as it turns out, Gatsby was a total fraud, and Vegas is a total fraud, right? So if that's the American dream, if that's if they're there to find the American dream in a place that has this circus, I mean, how insane would that have been to go to Circus when it was new and shiny, and you were either drunk or completely beaked out of your mind, and you're walking around, there's trapeze above you. I mean, that must have been absolutely insane.
I can tell you, the last time I was in Las Vegas, I did end up across the street from Circus, just looking at it, and my mouth hanging open, just being like, what is that? What is happening?
I went in there. I
can't even imagine.
I went in there one time, and it's worse than you think. Now, it is terrible in all respects, because it's become such a grinder joint. They actually
you go in there and you get on Grinder and you meet a dude.
No, it's like low roller, not high roller. Okay. Low roller grinders, man. And everything smells like smoke and puke, and it's just disgusting. Yeah. They have those, maybe I shouldn't say it, but those buses that go from like Mexico to LA. You used to see them down here all the time. They go from like El Paso, the border of Mexico, go to Los Angeles. Well, one of their stop in Vegas is at Circus. Yeah. So why? I don't know.
Oh,
and it was just so sad and terrible. It was late and we were really drunk. And we're like, we walked in and we're like, we got to just make exactly what they did. We just made a circuit.
You saw it. That's worth doing.
It was completely insane. So I think in that case, like, Gatsby's a fraud and Vegas is a fraud, Vegas is, but in one sense,
Vegas is a fraud. But like, if you don't know that when you go to Vegas,
let me finish. Let me finish. Okay. Gatsby is a fraud, as it turns out, right?
Right.
But by all appearances, he's not. Right. He seemed like a very well-to-do, well-educated, well-traveled person who's never been anywhere. He's just a criminal. But the appearance, he sets the appearance like this is somebody that she wants to marry. This is somebody that she could see herself with, right?
Right.
He's well-heeled, everything else.
Yeah.
That's what Vegas is. Vegas has this appearance of the American dream, right? It is. It's the appearance of everything that's good about America. You have wealth, you have, bright lights, you have excess, everything that America's supposed to have.
I'm not saying I haven't enjoyed sometimes in Las Vegas, but Las Vegas
I'm not saying that
literally,
either.
It
I'm just saying that
represents to me everything I do not like about America. And
I'm
I
just
love
saying
it.
that I see
I'm a big American, but
I see a parallel there. That's all I'm saying. Is
yeah,
between,
no, there's a big parallel. I'm just saying, to me, Vegas is like, it's you concentrate all the worst stuff about America in one place. Although to some extent, I guess the like libertine nature of it, like anything goes, I kind of dig that. Like that's fine, I get that. But it just all the glitz and the money and everything, to some extent, I don't know. That's just I don't like that stuff. And like I said, I'm a big America guy. Like I'm a defender of America to this day. Like I like this country, but that is some of the things that are kind of ugly about it. And I feel like if you go there and you think this is wonderful, like just if you go to Vegas and you're like everything about this place is wonderful, like I'm probably not going to be into you.
Right.
Like we're probably, like
I met some. I was flying out of Memphis. I was at the bar with these two Aussies, and they were taking a tour of America. They wanted to see America.
Right.
And I said, "Oh, that's cool." And so they're going to Memphis. And I said, what brings you to Memphis? Well, we had to see Graceland. They're big Elvis fans. Yeah. I was like, "Oh, okay." So in your tour to see America, where else are you going or have you been? And he said, "Well, we started in New York.
Okay.
And then we came to Memphis. And next we're going to New Orleans. And then we're going to Las Vegas. And then we're going to Los Angeles." Okay. And I said, "So you're going, that's America? New York, Graceland, New Orleans, Las Vegas, Los Angeles. That's America?"
You're gonna get some good and some bad on that trip. You know what I mean? Like I learned to love Los Angeles. I get LA a lot more than I used to. As an East Coast guy, I just didn't like Los Angeles. I've been there a bunch of times when I lived out west, and I realized, LA's got some really cool stuff about it. And I actually went to Vegas with a more open mind than the first time.
But I'm just saying that if you're going to pick 5 places to represent America, those are the least representative of America.
Well, let's be honest. The places that represent America is you're going to go to the suburbs of Columbus, Ohio, and stay at some stuff. Nobody from Australia is going to do that.
Right. I know. And maybe that's the point. But maybe that's the point, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we know that as America.
They missed some of the worst of us, which is
Miami. Yeah, come on, South Beach,
the dangling sack beneath America, where all of our pus and bile collects.
They could have gone to South Beach and worn a G-string and
there you go,
a Speedo, I guess. Anyway,
I think we're far enough along to talk about our biggest surprise. Did you?
All right, I'll let you go first. This is my pick.
Okay, so for biggest surprise. In the one interview I read, I was surprised to learn that Hunter S. Thompson, and I have 2 things. This is a minor surprise. Hunter S. Thompson was staying in the Watergate the night of the break-in.
I didn't know that.
In the building when that happened. Anyway, he was apologizing for not stopping the burglary and catching them.
Yeah, that's funny.
But he said it was one of his favorite places to stay in D.C. But the big surprise I found, and this, again, is kind of minor, but the list of drugs that he talks about in the book, he talks about something called adrenochrome, which is a drug that you take from the pineal gland of a human being, and you take it and it's supposed to have all these crazy effects, and talked about it. And apparently the idea of adrenochrome and the idea of a drug being taken from the pineal gland is something Hunter S. Thompson made up in this book. There's no basis to it whatsoever. It's something he invented. And apparently, and I might cut this because I don't know how crazy this part of the story is, but apparently the whole QAnon thing where they're like putting children in cabinets and sending them around the country, part of that is that supposedly they're supposed to be harvesting these children for adrenochrome drugs from their pineal glands. I was like,
really?
Yeah, wow. I was like, so Hunter S. Thompson invented a thing. Yeah. Now it's become, I don't know. I was just like the connection between those two things.
That is fascinating. I need to go read that one.
It was
I need to read that one. Yeah, that's cool. So my biggest surprise was how this whole thing kind of started. So
the gonzo journalism thing in general?
No, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. So
okay.
So in the book, he calls his kind of partner in crime, he's a 300-pound Samoan who is his attorney. And in real life, there was a guy named Oscar Zeta Acosta, who was an advocate, like an activist for Mexican American rights.
Yeah, he's like a Chicano.
Yeah, Chicano rights in the 1970s, right? 60s and 70s. And apparently there was another rights activist that was involved, that was a colleague of Oscar Acosta, who was assassinated in Los Angeles. the whole going to, so what Thompson wanted to interview Acosta, but Acosta feared for his life because his friend had been assassinated. So that's why they went to Vegas. That was the whole pretext. So Hunter
they didn't want to set off a Zoot Suit riot.
Right. Yeah. Right. Well, he did have the assignment from Sports Illustrated to cover that motorcycle race. So he used that as a pretext. You come along with me and I'll interview you for this story that he was doing about the Chicano movement. And that was the whole pretext for it. And he needed more time apparently afterwards to talk to him. So that's why he did the second. They went again the second time, using that convention as sort of, again, the pretext to go. So it was really interesting that there really was this guy. I'm looking at a picture of him now. He's a big dude. And there's a famous picture of the two of them at a table. I think it was at the Circus. His friend is wearing one glove. Zapata or whatever is wearing one glove.
Oh, yeah.
The table in front of them, they've got drinks scattered all over the place.
Yeah, I know this picture. Why is he wearing one glove? But it's so great.
I don't know. It's like one, but it's not even a driving glove. It's like a thick, like leather glove that you'd wear during the winter or something.
It's like the kind of glove you'd put like something heavy in if you're going to beat somebody. Like it's a big industrial work glove.
Right.
Yeah.
And so he's dressed in this pinstripe suit. I think that was like at the narcotics convention. He said that he was dressed like that. So
these are black and white photos, but for some reason, all of the photos, Hunter S. Thompson looks like he's wearing one of those neon multicolored jackets from the 90s.
Right.
You know what I'm talking about? Like the windbreakers that have like horrible colors to them. It looks like a black and white photo of one of those jackets. I don't know what jacket he's wearing. It's got multicolored patches on it. Yeah, so the decision is, are we toasting this classic?
It's up to you.
God, this is a tough one for me. I have been like tangential and sort of had a finger dipped in the Hunter S. Thompson mythos most of my life. Like some of my friends are really big in journalism, like in the journalism classes, and they're on a school newspaper and stuff. So Hunter S. Thompson, we watched the Bill Murray movie. I read the book when I was pretty young, and I got that, like I said, that anthology that I read, stuff like that. And it always leaves me feeling kind of flat because I don't think the prose, the actual writing is up to, like we compared it to Hemingway. Mm-hmm. I just don't think the writing is, it kind of feels like what he described it as, which is just taking a bunch of notes of some crazy stuff he did and like throwing them into the telecast and sending it to the office and not putting a whole lot of thought into what you're writing. And I don't love that. So I don't know, but I feel like it's important. The guy as a persona is important. But is this the work of Hunter S. Thompson that we would put up on Mount Rushmore of Hunter S. Thompson? I mean, this would be the book, right?
This would be. I think this would be the work. Book. Yeah.
It's not one of the other things. It's not one of the. It's this great shark hunt. There's a couple other works.
Fear and Loathing on the
I'm much more
trail.
interested in reading Hell's Angels expose. Actually, I think that would be interesting. So it's really tough. I've had 3 of these drinks. I've enjoyed them. That's eating me. That's filling me with good feelings. So I think I'm going to go ahead and toast.
All right.
Toast, but it's I'm on the fence. I don't love this writer, but he is an important writer. And if you were going to put together a couple of things from the 60s, I think this would probably be in there.
All right.
I think William S. Burroughs is a better writer. I think The Naked Lunch is a better book.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, for sure.
But
yeah.
And it would hit some of the same notes, but I think it's fair to include this in the pantheon. So I think I'm going to go for it. I think I'm going to.
All right. Well, cheers. Cool. Sounds awesome.
Cheers. Unfortunately, I drank everything I had to drink, so I think
that's all right.
But
all right. Well, cool. There we go.
So this is now a classic, according to us. If anybody wants to read about the 1960s, we'll do I'll put together a group of podcasts that are all about the things that happened in between 1970 and 1974, which I think is 90% of what we've talked about on the show.
It seems like it. Yeah.
So I'm going to go ahead and say this is a classic, and I'm going to sign off. This is Dave McArthur for Toasting the Classics. Peace out.
This is Clint Lanier with Toasting the Classics.
See y'all later.
All right. Peace.
That's it for episode 66 of Toasting the Classics. For those playing along at home, get some soju for our discussion of the Best Picture winning Parasite. If you'd like to get in touch, please send us an email at toastingtheclassics@gmail.com. Send us show ideas, comments, complaints, and let us know what suite of drugs you're keeping in your briefcases. Check out my blog at theattractivenuisance.com and follow us on Twitter at @attractivenuisance. Our music was written by Michelle McArthur. See you next time on Toasting the Classics.